Good evening. My name is Don Ficken. I'm with the Library Telescope Task Force, and joining me tonight is Tom Lynch, who's on our task force, and also Terry Menz from the River Bend Astronomy Club, and she will be our presenter. We're glad to have you once again. I think this is our 31st, as I counted right, our 31st presentation on the Library Telescope program. We do all types of different topics. If you're not familiar with the Library Telescope program, we've been in operation since 2008, and we've actually got 6 countries, believe it or not, and over 900 locations. That would be like a branch or an outlet of a library that we know of that have telescopes and sometimes binoculars for checkout, just like a book. And so if you go to our world map on librarytelescope.org, you can actually drill down to the different countries, including the Canada and US and parts of Europe, and you can find out if there's a library telescope program in your area. So our goal of the Library Telescope Task Force, which is a group that's been growing, is to grow the program and share best practices. We have a Facebook page, which Tom Lynch has done a terrific job of working on, over 5,000 followers, and he's always posting cartoons and great stuff about astronomy and whatever else. And sometimes he even gets himself locked into jail if he gets too many things going on at one time. He's very active on there. It's really terrific. And then I mentioned our website, which not only has that world map listing that we talked about, but it has lots of resources about for patrons, everything from night sky charts to how to start your own program and how to maintain your telescopes, your library program, and sometimes even 3D printed stuff that we've been doing to replace parts that are missing. I mentioned night sky charts. One of our members is with the Astronomical League, and he does a wonderful set of charts every month, not only in English, but in Spanish, and he usually brings up, adds a couple different charts on special things to see during the period. So I encourage you to check the homepage of librarytelescope.org. We have those posted out here for this month and last month, and I've got the July ready to be posted pretty soon. So they're really handy charts. They're free. Just download them and print those and use those for your program. So tonight's program, June 21st, is about Greek stories in the skies, which Terry will get into in just a moment. Last month, we talked about getting ready for the 2023 and 2024 solar eclipses. And so there's a nice presentation out there on that, and it's going to be some really great events, and especially if you're a library, you really want to think about what you're doing. And next month, we're going to have a new type of program. One of our members is actually working on putting a telescope program in his school. I think it's a high school, and that's a very interesting element of it. We've also seen parks and things like that. So he will present to us a library telescope program in schools. And you can get, if you go to our librarytelescope.org webpage, or also on Facebook, you can get, you can click the YouTube link at the very top of the page, or maybe it's the bottom, I'm not sure. But anyway, you will find that we've got a great library of all these history. Every one of our webinars are recorded, and we put those out there so you can literally go back and look at these things later. I know not everybody has time to watch a live presentation, so we certainly encourage you to take a look at those, and I think you'll find some of those are very good. Really, all of them are very good, and some of them are very relevant maybe to what you're after. So we will be taking questions at the end. We have limited time to do this, so we'll let Terry get through her presentation on Greek stories and the stars. And if you're on Facebook, you can put those into the comments area. Tom and I will be watching for those comments. If you're on Zoom, we got a few people, our task force members on Zoom. You can post questions to Zoom, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terry. I will stop sharing. And Terry, you can do your share thingy now.
All right, here we go.
Okay, I see your presentation really well.
Okay, let me get what I need. All right.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. All right. So tonight, what I'm going to talk about is why did the Greeks name constellations after their gods? And what are the stories behind the stars? We'll also talk about how do we locate and identify constellations, and you're experienced astronomer, you'll recognize that method quite readily. And what are the constellations telling us today? So, what are Greek myths? Well, the poet and scholar Robert Graves in 1955 listed two main functions of myths. The first is to answer the sort of awkward questions that children ask, such as, who made the world? How will it end? Who was the first man? Where do souls go after death? The second function of myth is to justify an existing social system and account for traditional rites and customs. Now, stories about gods and goddesses and heroes and monsters were an important part of everyday life. They explained everything from religious rituals to the weather, and they gave meaning to the world that people saw around them. So why did the Greeks name the constellations after their gods? The ancient Greeks called constellations katasterismoi, meaning placings of the stars, or placed by the gods. The Greeks believed that the Olympians put those people, animals, and objects in the heavens for a reason. To serve as unmistakable lessons on proper behavior. And often entire stories play out across the sky, traced from one constellation to the next. Now, much of the zodiac, which is a word coined from the Greek zodiakos kuklos, or circle of little animals, represents beasts defeated by the great hero Heracles as part of his labors. And you would probably more recognize Hercules, and that's this god's name in Roman mythology. These beasts included Leo, the Nemean lion, Cancer the crab, Taurus the Cretan bull, and other tales are even more bloody and brutish. Excuse me, I advanced. Reminding humanity of the punishments that await mortals who refuse to pay homage to the gods. Now, the Greek constellations are the 48 ancient constellations listed by the Greek astronomer Claudius Ptolemy in his Almagest in the 2nd century CE. All but one of these constellations have survived to the present day and are officially recognized by the International Astronomical Union. Now, most of them are associated with stories from Greek mythology. Ptolemy identified the 12 constellations of the Zodiac, 21 constellations north of the Zodiac, and 15 constellations to the south. So today I will discuss these 10 major constellations: Cassiopeia, Pegasus, Orion, Ursa Major, Taurus, Gemini, Leo, Scorpius, Sagittarius, and Cygnus. Start with Cassiopeia, the queen. She is the wife of Cephas and mother of Andromeda. She has chained her throne in the heavens as punishment for her boast of being more beautiful than all the Nereids. The Nereids are the sea-nymph daughters of the old man of the sea. The god Poseidon placed Cassiopeia and Cephas in the sky, and Cassiopeia was condemned to circle the celestial pole forever. As the stars rotate throughout the night, Cassiopeia can sometimes be seen hanging upside down as a punishment for her vanity. The constellation of Pegasus is named after the legendary winged horse from Greek mythology. According to legend, the white-winged horse had magical powers. Pegasus was born when the legendary Greek hero Perseus cut off Medusa's head. He served Zeus as the carrier of his lightning bolts. Zeus eventually placed the horse among the stars as a constellation. In Greek mythology, this constellation represents the great hunter Orion. He was the son of the sea god Poseidon and Euryale, the daughter of King Minos of Crete. Orion boasted that he would kill every animal on earth. This angered the god Gaia, so she sent a scorpion to kill him. The gods felt sorry for Orion, so they put him in and his dogs in the sky as constellations, along with all the animals he hunted. Scorpius the scorpion was placed on the opposite side of the sky so that Orion would never be hurt by it again. To this day, Orion is never seen in the sky at the same time as Scorpius. In Greek mythology, Ursa Major is often associated with Callisto, a nymph who was turned into a bear by Hera, the jealous wife of Zeus. During the Civil War, the Big Dipper was used by the Underground Railroad. Slaves escaping from the South were told to follow the drinking gourd to a better life. This is because the Big Dipper is circumpolar, meaning it can be seen in the north all night long. The message of the drinking gourd was passed along in the form of song, since most of the slaves were unable to read or write. In Greek mythology, Taurus is usually associated with Zeus, who adopted the shape of a bull in order to court and abduct Europa, the beautiful daughter of the Phoenician king Agenor. Zeus mingled with the king's herd, and being the most handsome bull there, he got Europa's attention. The princess admired the bull, and when she sat on his back, he rose and headed for the sea. Zeus carried Europa all the way to the island of Crete, where he revealed his true identity and lavished the princess with presents. The two had 3 sons together, including Minos, who grew up to be the famous king of Crete. Zeus later commemorated the bull by placing it among the stars. The constellation Gemini means the twins in Latin. It represents the twins Castor and Pollux, 2 Greek heroes who were among the men Jason led on his voyages on the Argo. According to myth, they were actually half-brothers and not really twins. They shared the same mother, Leda, but had different fathers. Castor's father was a king of Sparta called Tenedrius. Sorry, some of these names are very difficult. While the father of Pollux was Zeus himself. The constellation Leo means lion in Latin. In Greek mythology, it was named after the Nemean lion, which was killed by Hercules on the first of his 12 labors for the king of Mycenae. According to legend, the lion had a hide that could not be pierced by iron, bronze, or stone. Hercules strangled the great beast after unsuccessfully trying to reason with it. And again, in Greek mythology, the constellation Scorpius was identified with the scorpion that stung Orion, the mythical hunter. The 2 constellations lie opposite each other in the sky, and Orion is said to be fleeing from the scorpion as Orion sets, just as Scorpius rises. In one version of the myth, Orion tried to ravish the goddess Artemis, and she sent the scorpion to do away with him. In another version, it was the earth that sent the scorpion after Orion boasted that he could defeat any wild beast. The scorpion still chases Orion. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I'm getting choked up here. In another version, it was the Earth that sent the Scorpion after Orion, that boasted that he could defeat any wild beast, and the Scorpion still chases Orion across the heavens, but will never catch him because it rises in the east and after Orion has set in the west. In Greek mythology, Sagittarius represents a centaur, a half-human, half-horse creature with the torso of a man and the body and four legs of a horse. The centaur is depicted as aiming an arrow toward the heart of the neighboring constellation Scorpius, represented by the red supergiant Antares. There are many conflicting myths to explain the origin of this centaur, so his exact identity is not known. Some legends say that he was placed in the heavens to guide the Argonauts on their travels. Cygnus, which was also cataloged by Ptolemy, means the swan in Latin. There are several mythological origins for this constellation. In one version, the swan is the musician Orpheus, who was killed by Achilles at the Battle of Troy. Upon his death, he was placed among the stars with his harp, Lyra. In another version, the swan was the pet of the queen, Cassiopeia. In still another version, the god Zeus transformed himself into a swan to seduce the Spartan queen Leda. She gave birth to the twins Castor and Pollux, represented by the constellation Gemini. The stars in this constellation form a large cross, sometimes referred to as the Northern Cross. Deneb, the brightest star in Cygnus, Altair in Aquila, and Vega in Lyra form a large triangle known as the Summer Triangle. Now, there are 12 constellations in the Zodiac family. They can all be seen along the ecliptic. They are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpius, Sagittarius, Capricornus, Aquarius, and Pisces. Now, these constellations are connected to myth and legend, as well as the unscientific concepts of modern astrology. However, they were also important instruments that once marked the passage of time and the seasons. Today, constellations continue to be valuable tools to orient astronomers and stargazers in the night sky. The International Astronomical Union recognizes 88 constellations, which include all 12 of the zodiac constellations. Astronomers can use constellations to explain what parts of the sky are part of their work or orient themselves to find objects they have seen in space. The Moorhead Planetarium also recommends using constellations as a reference point to spot faster moving planets. For casual sky watchers, the zodiac constellations are recognizable because they have a story and shape associated with them. Similarly, constellations can be used to describe where a meteor shower is where a meteor shower might appear in the sky or where a comet might come into view. Now, astronauts still learn star navigation according to NASA's Spaceplace. It's a backup to computerized navigation systems, but it's a good backup. Seafarers and explorers use stars and constellations to navigate for thousands of years, and even autonomous spacecraft sent to explore far from Earth can use constellations in their star maps to navigate. Our ancestors around the planet found the stars useful for timing harvests and plantings, but they also used constellations to tell stories and find meaning. Now, planetariums and skywatching programs retell those stories to capture attention, spark curiosity, and to keep the ancient history of space exploration alive. And Don, that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Terry. And by the way, Terry's right on the edge of a cold here, so that's why she's getting a little bit of a dry throat there. But that was really interesting, actually. I find that when I look at the stars, it just takes me back to how people in many years ago didn't have television. They would just look up and they would start making up stories. And like you say, that's the stars help them find their way home or find their way across the ocean, or maybe connect them somewhere in the history of the past, to stories that are really interesting. So if you've got some questions, please post them to our Facebook page under the comments area. And Tom, if you could watch for those questions, I'd appreciate it. And if you're on Zoom here, feel free to do that. So what I find interesting, Terry, and it's really hard to do this in a short program like you have right here, but there are so many different asterisms or constellations in the sky where, the world didn't used to be connected like it is today. You could have Native Americans in the US and then folks in Asia and folks in Europe and UK and Africa see the same stars, but they're making up different stories. It's always really interesting to talk about how they really thought about this stuff. Like the Big Dipper, for example, right? The Big Dipper for us is the Ursa Major, but in, I think, UK and Ireland, I believe it was considered the Plough, right? And then other places, it might be considered the Cleaver, whatever else. And so those are really interesting. In fact, I think one of the cool stories is the Big Dipper. Some thought that was the actual bear, and then the little 3 stars at the handle where the little bear is following the big bear, right? So that's really cool. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too. The program Stellarium, which a lot of us use, has a feature on it where you can actually see what were considered constellations by other cultures.
Oh, really?
And yes, it's a folklore, I think. And then there's also links to, if there's any literature out there that they have researched and associated with those constellations, you can look that up. So I thought that was very fascinating when I first saw that. The kids, when I do in that program, they just love to look at some of the names of the constellations. They're so used to the names we give the constellations, the Western view. But when we look at Indian or Chinese or something, or Korean, and they just wonder what, that's a funny name for a constellation. So.
Yeah, I find that some of them are pretty obvious to me. For example, Scorpius looks really like a scorpion to me in the sky. You can see that tail and you can very clearly see this. And to me, Cygnus the Swan, I can imagine that easily, the long neck and the beautiful alberio, nose with the stars there that you can look that are very pretty in a telescope, and you can see the wings. But some of them, I think they had maybe a little bit too much hooch or something going on. Maybe they're a little smoky weed or something like that. Let's just make up some good stuff and see if we can tell them. And yeah, you can't see that. Well, then you're not very smart or something. I don't know. But sometimes they're really stretching the truth. And that's because they didn't have much else to do except make up stories, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the very common things that I know that we do as amateur astronomers is we use the constellations. Once we know where things are, there are objects, for example, double stars, like in Cygnus Swan at the nose. If you could find Cygnus Swan, you can reference and find that beautiful double star very easily. And if you go behind Cygnus Swan, there's things to see there, like I think they call it the hanger, I guess, whatever else, and things like that. And
yeah, the coat hanger.
The coat hanger is very cool. So it really is useful to kind of understand the constellations and some of their stories, because once you understand that, you might have a telescope and you might be looking at something, but you have no idea what you're looking at. But those constellations can really help you start finding your way around the sky, right? So.
And I know some of the more elaborate star maps, maybe not the ones we put out on Library Telescope, but ones that, maybe one of our club members use, has designations for stars, and they use, I don't know if it's Greek letters, so some abbreviation of a constellation, and then a number or a letter, and it designates where that star is in the constellation. I thought that was interesting too.
Right. And of course, we have the ecliptic, that is where the sun's path is during the day, and that's where the moon's path and the planets are at night, right? That's where the
Right.
zodiac constellations would be. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
they
what.
change. They change. They're not up there every night. They're changed seasonally. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's hence the used to decide about harvests or seasons coming and passage of time.
Right. Right. So Tom, have you done some constellation stuff before yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I like to point out different things like in fact, somebody raised this in comments, the 13th Zodiac constellation, right? Not really part of the Zodiac, but it's where the sun does actually go through Ophiuchus, I think is the pronunciation of it. Sun does actually go through Ophiuchus, I think is the.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so that was raised by someone, but I mean, I don't think it's technically a zodiac constellation, but it is part of the ecliptic that where it passes through. Somebody else mentioned Hercules versus Heracles. I mean, Heracles, I think, was the original name for Hercules, and it degenerated into Hercules at some point, I believe. But I mean, Hercules is sort of what we know it as today, but it was Heracles. I believe he was named after Hera, which was Zeus trying to get his wife Hera not to be ticked off about this progeny that he had, when in fact it just made her madder about it. So that's just an very, very interesting story there. But all of these are such great stories. There's so
Yeah.
much. And there's multiple versions of them too, which is interesting. So even if you hear a story and then somebody says, well, that's not really what it says, and well, it does in different places. And just because this was all word of mouth for so long, different versions developed, and so that just makes it interesting too. More stuff.
So Terry, you talked about the scorpion, right? So what was the story? The scorpion is on one side of the sky, is that right?
Right.
And the
Right.
other side of the sky was what? What constellation?
Orion.
Orion. So they sort of separated them, and said, okay, you guys stay apart here. We don't want one kind of getting the other kind of thing. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So the gods are trying to protect Orion from the scorpion. So they're at opposite sides.
Yeah. Well, the Scorpius area, that's a very beautiful part of the sky. So there's plenty,
it is.
plenty of stuff for that scorpion to keep busy over there, I guess, with all the stuff in the sky. I know when I first saw that, I'm thinking, wow, there's so many things in dark skies. It's like little white puffs everywhere. It's really very cool to be able to see that, that area of the sky. So,
well, it's a good way to then zero back in on Sagittarius. And then, of course, this wasn't in there because the Greeks didn't know the song, but we like to do the I'm a Little Teapot for the Sagittarius teapot. So
yeah. So for those not familiar with the Sagittarius, my wife's, by the way, a teapot collector. She has, I don't know, so many teapots, 30 plus teapots. And so it's always great to see that little teapot up there. And I guess there's a little thing to where they say there's steam coming out, which is some of the deep sky objects there. But it's a very cool, and once you see the teapot in your mind, you can't lose it after that. It's like you can't forget it. It's very easy to remember that. Just like the dove, the Cygnus swan, it looks like a big swan, right? So it's very cool. So all right, Tom, do we have any questions from the group here?
No, I don't see any more. I think that was pretty much it.
All right. Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and basically end the program here tonight. We will be, we have recorded this, and I will post this out on our YouTube page for the Library Telescope. Once again, you can go to our librarytelescope.org website and hit the YouTube channel, and it'll be out there sometime probably tomorrow. I just have to do a little bit of work to get it out there, but we really appreciate everybody attending tonight, and I hope you'll join us next month as we talk about basically library telescopes in the schools. I think that's a really interesting area that is starting to pick up a little bit in parks. It's been very exciting to see the program grow. We're hitting right at 1,000 outlets throughout the world, and and Tom's hits his 5,000 Facebook followers, Mark, and so we're growing like crazy. And so we really appreciate everybody joining us, and thank you. And y'all have a great evening. And thanks, Terry. Great job, and Tom for helping. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.